And we're back. Sorry guys, I haven't been uploading lately. Just a lot of stuff's been happening, but now I hope to get back on track. And we're going to start off with this video today, which, by the way, this video's topic comes from a poll I had on Twitter. So go ahead and follow me on Twitter if you want to participate in more polls to sort of steer the direction of this channel. But yeah, let's get into the video. Almost did a Keemstar reference, and I'm not that low. Hey, what's up everybody? There's something I want to talk to you guys about. I want to talk about some terms that are crucial to understanding the overall plot of Transformers. The problem is that the meaning of these terms are sort of buried away in Transformers lore, and I want to bring what they really mean to light. I want to clarify the meaning of the term universe and the term continuity in the context of Transformers canon. First, in the sci-fi fandom community, what do these terms usually mean? When we bring up universe, you might think of something like a shared universe like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or two different Star Wars universes. A universe is considered to be the overall setting of a story, and certain stories fall into the same universe. The Marvel Cinematic Universe consists of things like the movies, television shows, and comic book tie-ins. But yes, in sci-fi fandom terms, universe refers to the overall setting that all works in that universe share, including history, characters, and worlds. Now we go to the term continuity. In the sci-fi fandom, the term continuity can refer to a shared story between and within works. This includes the history of the world and the backstory of the characters. Sound familiar? What I'm trying to say here is that in general, the term continuity and the term universe are pretty much interchangeable in the sci-fi fandom community, as they usually have either the identical meaning or meanings that are so similar that the differences aren't worth even noting. This is not the case in Transformers. To understand why, we have to understand the difference between Transformers and other sci-fi franchises. Think of some of the great sci-fi franchises. The first two to come up will probably be Star Wars and Star Trek. These two were developed initially as films or television shows and expanded essentially through sequels, prequels, and spin-offs in various forms of media. It started and then expanded in a relatively more controlled fashion, with the new media created being approved by the authority on the fiction, meaning you basically had job positions in charge of making sure that everything fits in the continuity and universe, and when something didn't fit, this would usually mean the creation of an alternate universe, and eventually we have the Star Wars multiverse and the Star Trek multiverse as we know them today. Though it should be noted that there are far less official Star Wars or Star Trek universes than there are Transformers universes. Unlike Star Wars and Star Trek, the Transformers franchise did not start as an effort to create compelling science fiction in the first place. Transformers started with the purpose to sell toys. While Star Wars and Star Trek would have toys grow out of their success, the fiction for Transformers was essentially only an advertisement for these toys on the shelves. Being an intellectual property under Hasbro took the same route they did when they rebranded G.I. Joe, which also has retroactively been made part of the Transformers multiverse. Their method to sell toys was simultaneously go through two forms of media: comic books and television cartoons. The first Transformers fiction came in the form of the Transformers No. 1, published by Marvel Comics on May 8, 1984. 2 months later, on July 10th, issue 2 was released. However, on September 17th, 4 months after the original release of Transformers No. 1, the first episode of the Transformers cartoon, More Than Meets the Eye Part 1, was aired. The cartoon was set in an absolutely different continuity than the comics, and had conflicting stories in it. See, while Star Wars and Star Trek were concerned with developing a universe and continuity, Transformers was concerned with releasing new material to hook newcomers in. While there were basically job positions in Star Wars and Star Trek to make sure all the expanded universe was in check, you didn't have that with Transformers. In 1996, Beast Wars Transformers began. It was at this point that the Transformers began to mature and develop itself as a proper science fiction franchise, and beyond that of a glorified toy advertisement. The television show borrowed elements from both the Marvel comic and the cartoon, and for a while people generally accepted that Beast Wars takes place in a general Generation 1 universe, while not specifically in any particular universe. However, it became evident that the willy-nilly formation of fiction without any guidance was dying out as the fans grew older and a unified fiction began to be considered more often. In 1997, Hasbro gave a comic company called 3H the license for Transformers comics, and it is here where Transformers began to piece together itself, fully fleshing out the concept of universal singularities and confirming that Beast Wars did take place in the G1 cartoon universe. Time went on and a problem emerged. While Transformers was trying to tie all of its fictional universes together into a large-scale multiverse story arc, there was still the absence of someone to make sure that everything fit in its place. Because of this, stories were still being published that walked a fine line of crossing the rules 3H and Hasbro set. Particularly, there were two major obstacles. the Japanese Generation 1 continuity, and the soon-to-be-released Transformers live-action films. Let's start with the issue of Japanese Generation 1. While the US had been juggling with two distinct Transformers continuities at the time, Japan had not imported the Marvel continuity and only had the Generation 1 cartoon. The Japanese media under Takada was also more concerned with creating a cohesive universe to compete with other mech shows. While mecha anime like Mobile Suit Gundam were present in the United States, they were nowhere near as popular as they were in Japan. One of the defining features of the mecha genre in Japan was world building and creating a cohesive continuity and universe through media like anime and manga. This may have been done because of the inspiration the mech genre got from Star Wars itself. The genre may have carried over the idea of a cohesive universe. The Transformers Generation 1 cartoon ended in the United States with the short 3-episode Season 4, and then Season 5, which was largely a clip show of the previous seasons. Takada continued to want to compete with other giant robot franchises in Japan, and made the decision to hold off on Season 4 for the moment, and never release Season 5. And instead, they released a brand new Transformers series called Transformers The Headmasters. While America moved on to making new Transformers series for different toy lines, Japan continued to put effort into the Generation 1 cartoon universe with loads of anime, manga, story pages, radio drama, and more. While the first wave of the Generation 1 media ended in America, Japan continues producing material that ties into their universe to this day. Takada-led Transformers had a policy of putting as much as they could into one universe, and wasn't that cooperative with the American idea of making the Transformers story a more multiverse-based rather than universe-based. The other obstacle was the soon-to-be-released live-action Transformers movies under the direction of Michael Bay. This is simply because the movie was intended for a wider public audience as a whole, and didn't want to be tied down to some of the rules of the Transformers multiverse. In Star Wars, we can see how successful movies led to expanded universe material. With the Michael Bay movies, we're seeing essentially the reverse of this. It was obvious that the movies couldn't exactly keep in with the multiversal mythos of Primus and Unicron that had been established, and it was left to comic tie-ins to keep the movies from ripping a huge plot hole in the whole of the then 25-year-old franchise. So what was Hasbro's answer to this? Was it to create a job position to oversee all Transformers media, both in the United States and in Japan, to make sure contradictions weren't made? Well, no. Their answer to this problem is what I'd like to call moduleization. It is through this modularization of Transformers lore that we get the complicated differences between the terms universe and continuity in Transformers. Basically, Hasbro established Trans-Tech multiversal notation. If you don't know about this, click here for my video covering multiversal notation. A link will also be in the description. Now, here's the problem with multiversal notation. Transformers Episode 1 is Primex 984.17 Alpha. But watch this. Episode 2 was released on September 18th. Primex 984.18 Alpha. Episode 3 was released on September 19th, Primex 984.19 Alpha. Do you see the problem here? In Transformers, the classification of universes is essentially modular. They're like blocks that you can put together in almost any way you want to. The term universe in Transformers is not necessarily the same thing as continuity. But why is it like this? Well, look at it like this. Say Transformers 5, The Last Night, talks about the origins of the war, and it's absolutely nothing like how the comics talked about it. Something like this is likely to happen because 1. Michael Bay does not read the comics, and 2. There is no job position where someone can make sure that it fits the comics that Michael Bay did not read. If an event like this were to happen, we'd be calling the universe that included the comics in the first 4 movies Tyran 207.28 Gamma after the first IDW movie tie-in comic, and we'd call the main movie universe Tyran 707.04 Delta, as that would strictly be the movies themselves. Literally every single piece of Transformers media can have its own notation. So we know that the correct way to use universe in the context of Transformers is pretty much purely on the cosmological scale, and not that of plot or story element, which brings us to the term continuity. With Transformers, continuity pretty much refers to stories set in the same universe, and I'm using the word universe here in the sense of a sci-fi fandom way, rather than a Transformers way. These continuities usually have something to form its base. For example, we'll take the American Generation 1 cartoon continuity. That includes Transformers Seasons 1 through 5, Transformers the Movie, the entirety of the G.I. Joe A Real American Hero cartoon, including the later seasons made by Dick, and G.I. Joe the Movie, Gem and the Holograms, Inhumanoids, Cops, Beast Wars Transformers, Beast Machines Transformers, the 3H comics, Mars Attacks the Transformers, Ain't No Rat, Rodimus vs. Cyclonus, the Madman Transformers comic, and more. Now, there's the IDW Beast Wars comics that use both Beast Wars and the Generation 1 cartoon as its base. However, it completely contradicts things that happen in Ain't No Rat in the 3H comics. This leads to the IDW Beast Wars comic being a separate continuity, but also has the cartoons and movies, though not necessarily the extended comics. Now this goes back to what I said earlier about the Beast Wars cartoon originally being thought of happening in a general G1 universe that borrows elements from both Marvel and the cartoon, but not specifically in each one. That is both true and not true. See, Beast Wars is in its own separate universe that borrows elements from both Marvel and the cartoon, but not specifically in one of them. That is the universe Primex 496.22 Alpha. However, it also does take place in the American and Japanese Generation 1 cartoon continuities, as well as the IDW Beast Wars continuity that includes the Generation 1 cartoon. Well, let me tell you, I have a huge headache making this video, and I really hope I explained the difference between the terms when in a Transformers context. Basically, everything is in its own separate universe, but a lot of things happen within the same continuity as each other. Usually there is a notation for common continuity. Primex 984.17 Alpha usually refers to the entirety of the American G1 cartoon continuity, for example. However, don't be surprised if you see things like Primex 1298.19 Alpha, which refers to the Beast Wars 2nd movie, that clearly takes place in Beast Wars 2nd. Well, I think if I keep going down this subject, my head is going to explode, so I'll leave it off here. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability, but no promises. But as usual, thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe if you want to, follow me on social media for updates, and have a good day, ladies and gentlemen. 千本桜夜に紛れ君の声も